I woke up in my childhood bedroom, gasping as the memories of my death crashed over me like a tidal wave. The poison burning through my veins, my sister Maya's satisfied smile as I collapsed during my university entrance exam, the feeling of my life slipping away, all of it rushed back with crystal clarity. But here I was, somehow 17 again, 3 days before that fateful exam that would determine my entire future. My hands trembled as I reached under my mattress, fingers closing around the familiar weight of the crimson amulet. The ancient artifact pulsed with warmth against my palm, its ruby surface seeming to glow in the dim morning light. In my previous life, I'd discovered it hidden in our grandmother's old trunk, tucked away in the attic after her funeral. I'd been foolish then, naive enough to trust Maya when she'd begged me to let her borrow it for good luck on her own exams. I'd thought it was just a pretty bauble. I'd had no idea it was a genuine magical artifact, one that granted its wielder incredible fortune and success, but only after it had tasted their blood. Maya had figured out the blood requirement through her obsessive research into the occult, something I'd only learned in my dying moments when she'd whispered the truth in my ear as the poison took hold. The bedroom door burst open without a knock, just as it always had. Maya stood there in her silk pajamas, her perfect blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, blue eyes bright with that familiar calculating gleam. At 19, she was everything our parents had ever wanted: beautiful, charming, and utterly ruthless in her pursuit of what she desired. "Good morning, little sister," she purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you're ready for your big exam. Though honestly, I don't know why you're even bothering. We both know you'll never measure up to what I've accomplished." I bit my tongue, remembering how those words had once cut deep. In my previous life, I'd spent years believing I was inferior, that Maya's constant academic achievements and social successes meant she was simply better than me. I'd never realized that every time I'd started to excel at something, Maya had found a way to sabotage me. The accidentally ruined art project the night before the school exhibition. The study notes she'd borrowed and never returned right before major tests. The lies she'd told our parents about my whereabouts when I'd been working part-time to save money for college. "Actually," I said, sitting up straighter and meeting her gaze with newfound confidence, "I'm feeling really good about my chances." Something flickered across Maya's face, surprise, perhaps even a hint of unease. She'd expected me to cower, to stammer out some self-deprecating response. Instead, I was watching her with steady, knowing eyes. "That's wonderful," she said slowly. "You know, I've been thinking about that pretty necklace Grandma left you. The one with the red stone? I have a job interview next week, and red is supposed to be a power color. Maybe I could borrow it, for luck?" There it was, right on schedule, just as it had happened before. Maya had always been able to read people, to know exactly what buttons to push to get what she wanted. With our parents, she played the perfect daughter. With her friends, she was the generous socialite. And with me, she'd perfected the art of making her cruelest demands sound like reasonable requests that only a selfish person would refuse. "Of course," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Anything for my big sister." The relief that washed over Maya's face was almost comical. She'd been prepared for a fight, had probably already planned out her manipulation tactics. My easy acquiescence threw her off balance. "Really? Just like that?" "Just like that." I pulled the amulet from under my pillow, letting it dangle from its silver chain. The ruby caught the light, seeming to pulse with an inner fire. "But I should warn you, Grandma always said it was important to give of yourself to make it work properly. Something about the old magic requiring sacrifice." Maya's eyes were fixed on the amulet now, hungry and desperate. "What kind of sacrifice?" I shrugged as if it didn't matter. "Oh, you know how Grandma was with her superstitions. Something about blood, I think. Like you need to let it taste your essence to bond with you. Probably just old folklore, but—" I let the sentence hang. "Blood magic?" Maya whispered, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She'd always been obsessed with the occult, spending hours researching ancient rituals and supernatural artifacts online. The idea of real magic would be irresistible to her. Like I said, probably just superstition. I held out the amulet. "But if you want to try it, just prick your finger and let a drop fall on the stone." Couldn't hurt, right? Maya snatched the amulet from my hands, her fingers closing possessively around the ruby. Right, just superstition. But I could see the excitement building in her eyes, the same look she'd gotten as a child when she'd thought she'd discovered something secret and powerful. I'll take good care of it, she promised, though we both knew her promises were worthless. And Maya, good luck on your exam. I know you're going to do exactly what you deserve. After she left, I lay back on my bed and smiled. Maya had no idea what she'd just agreed to. In my previous life, after stealing the amulet and using it to cheat her way to success, she'd eventually learned the full truth about its power. The Crimson Amulet was indeed magical, and it did grant incredible fortune to its wielder. But like all true magical artifacts, it demanded a price proportional to the benefit received. A single drop of blood would bond the amulet to its user, granting them good luck in small matters, finding parking spaces, getting green lights, having teachers grade leniently. But Maya wanted more than small favors. She wanted guaranteed success, wealth, and power. And for that level of magic, the amulet would demand a much steeper price. The more she used it, the more it would take. First, it would be small things, a few sleepless nights, occasional headaches, minor accidents. She'd rationalize them away, convinced the trade-off was worth it. But the amulet was hungry, and it would grow hungrier with each wish granted. Eventually, it would start taking years from her life, aging her rapidly, draining her vitality to fuel the magic she craved. I'd learned all this too late in my previous life, when Maya had confessed everything to me as I lay dying. She'd been gaunt and hollow-eyed by then, looking decades older than her actual age, her once beautiful hair thin and brittle. The amulet had given her everything she'd wanted: top grades, admission to the most prestigious university, a wealthy fiancé, a perfect job. But it had cost her nearly everything she was. The irony was that she could have stopped at any time by simply removing the amulet and breaking the blood bond. But Maya had never been able to resist the allure of easy success, and by the time she'd realized the true cost, she'd been too addicted to the power to give it up. This time, I wasn't going to try to save her. This time, I was going to let her make her own choices and face the consequences. The next 2 days passed in a strange sort of peace. I studied for my exam with a focus I'd never possessed in my previous life, finally understanding that my supposed intellectual limitations had been more about Maya's sabotage than any actual inability on my part. Without her stealing my notes, hiding my textbooks, or feeding me wrong information about test dates and requirements, I found that learning came naturally to me. Maya, meanwhile, was practically glowing with confidence. I'd catch her touching the amulet through her shirt, smiling that secretive smile she got when she thought she was getting away with something. She'd started wearing it immediately, and I could already see the small signs that it was working. The way professors seemed more attentive when she spoke, how traffic lights always seemed to turn green just as she approached, the way perfect opportunities kept falling into her lap. On the morning of the exam, Maya was positively radiant. She'd spent the previous evening at a party, confident that the amulet would ensure her success regardless of her preparation. She swept down to breakfast in a designer dress, the ruby amulet prominently displayed against her chest like a trophy. "Nervous about today?" she asked me, cutting into her eggs Benedict with delicate precision. Our mother had made Maya's favorite breakfast, of course, while I got the usual bowl of generic cereal. "Not really," I said truthfully. "I feel like everything's going to work out exactly as it should." Maya laughed, the sound bright and cruel. "Oh, honey, I admire your optimism, but we both know how these things usually go for you. Remember your SATs? Or that science fair project that mysteriously fell apart?" I remembered. In my previous life, Maya had paid someone to break into my locker and destroy my project the night before judging. This time, I'd been ready for her tricks. This time, I'd anticipated every move. "You're right," I said, spooning cereal into my mouth. "But I guess I'm just feeling lucky today." The exam center was buzzing with nervous energy when we arrived. Maya immediately gravitated toward her usual crowd, the popular kids who'd always treated me like I was invisible. I watched her work the room, laughing and charming everyone around her, the amulet catching the fluorescent lights as she gestured expressively. I found my assigned seat and settled in, pulling out my pencils and calculator with steady hands. All around me, other students were fidgeting, reviewing last-minute notes, or staring blankly ahead with terror-frozen expressions. But I felt calm. I knew exactly what was coming. The proctor called for attention, beginning his standard spiel about exam procedures and regulations. Maya shot me a final smug look from across the room, her hand briefly touching the amulet in what I now recognized as a ritualistic gesture. Then the exam booklets were distributed and the timer began. I opened mine and smiled. The questions were exactly as I remembered them, and this time I was ready. In my previous life, I'd been so thrown off by Maya's psychological warfare and the effects of the slow-acting poison she'd slipped into my water bottle that I'd barely been able to focus. This time, I'd brought my own water and prepared for every possible sabotage attempt. The hours flew by as I worked steadily through the problems, my confidence growing with each completed section. Mathematics had always been my strongest subject, but Maya had convinced our parents that I was struggling by consistently helping me with homework in ways that actually made me doubt my own abilities. Without her interference, the numbers flowed like poetry. As I worked, I occasionally glanced over at Maya. She was moving through her exam with unusual speed, a small smile playing at her lips. The amulet was clearly working, granting her supernatural insight into the correct answers. She'd finish with perfect scores, I was certain of that. The artifact wouldn't let her fail, not when failure would reflect poorly on its own power. But I also knew something Maya didn't. The amulet's power came with a built-in trap, one that wouldn't manifest until much later. Every correct answer it gave her, every moment of supernatural luck, was being recorded in what grandmother's old journal had called the debt ledger. The artifact was essentially lending Maya success against her future, and like any predatory lender, it would eventually come to collect with interest. When the timer finally rang, I set down my pencil with satisfaction. I'd answered every question to the best of my ability, drawing on knowledge I genuinely earned through study and preparation. Maya, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with excitement as she handed in her booklet. "How do you think you did?" she asked me as we walked out together, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I think I did exactly as well as I deserved to," I replied. She laughed. "Well, I absolutely nailed it. I've never felt so confident about an exam in my life. It's like I knew all the answers before I even read the questions." "That's wonderful," I said. "I'm sure you'll get exactly what's coming to you." The test results would take 2 weeks to arrive. During that time, Maya continued to bask in the amulet's power. Her job interviews went perfectly, with employers practically throwing offers at her feet. Her social media posts got thousands of likes within minutes of posting. Even the weather seemed to cooperate with her plans, sunny when she wanted to go out, rainy when she preferred to stay inside. But I was watching for the subtler signs, and I began to notice them after about a week. Maya was sleeping more, but seemed tired all the time. Her appetite had increased dramatically, as if her body was trying to compensate for some massive energy drain. Most telling of all, I caught her staring at herself in mirrors with a puzzled expression, as if something about her reflection wasn't quite right. The first obvious physical change appeared on day 10. Maya came down to breakfast looking haggard, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Are you feeling all right?" our mother asked, her voice full of concern. "You look a bit pale." "I'm fine," Maya snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Just excited about getting my test results. I might have stayed up too late celebrating in advance." But I could see the worry in her eyes. Maya had always been vain about her appearance, and she was clearly disturbed by the changes she was seeing. She kept touching her face throughout breakfast, her fingers tracing the new lines that had appeared around her eyes. The test results arrived on a Tuesday morning. Maya tore open her envelope with trembling fingers, her face lighting up as she scanned the scores. "Perfect!" she shrieked, jumping up from the kitchen table. "I got perfect scores in every section. This is impossible. I mean, this is incredible." Our parents erupted in celebration, hugging Maya and praising her intelligence. I opened my own envelope more calmly, unsurprised to find scores that, while excellent, were realistically achievable for someone of my actual ability level. "How did you do, sweetie?" my mother asked, though her attention was clearly still focused on Maya's miraculous achievement. Well enough to get into any school I want, I said honestly. Maya was practically glowing with triumph, the amulet pulsing visibly against her chest. But I could see that the glow wasn't entirely supernatural anymore. There was a feverish quality to her excitement, and her hands were shaking slightly. "We have to celebrate," she declared. "This calls for a party." She spent the rest of the day planning an elaborate celebration, inviting everyone she knew and sparing no expense. Our parents, delighted by her success, gave her free rein to organize whatever she wanted. That evening, as Maya held court in our backyard, surrounded by friends and admirers, all toasting her incredible achievement, I noticed that she looked older in the party lights. The changes were subtle but unmistakable: deeper lines around her eyes, a slight looseness to her skin, a brittle quality to her hair that makeup and styling couldn't quite disguise. She caught me watching her and approached with a glass of champagne in her hand, swaying slightly. "Not drinking?" she asked, her words just a little too careful. "Oh, that's right. You're still technically underage. Unlike some of us who are mature enough to handle adult responsibilities." "I'm exactly 2 years younger than you, Maya." 2 years can make all the difference," she said, taking a long sip of champagne. 2 years of experience, of learning how the world really works. That's probably why things come so much easier to me than they do to you." I studied her face in the flickering light of the patio torches. She looked exhausted beneath the makeup, and there was something desperate in her eyes, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "You're probably right," I said gently, "though I have to say, you look tired. Are you sure you're getting enough sleep?" Maya's hand flew to her face, self-consciously touching the area under her eyes. "I'm fine. Great, actually. Better than ever." But her voice lacked its usual conviction. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I helped clean up in the kitchen, while Maya held court with her remaining admirers on the patio. Through the window, I could see her animated storytelling, the way she gestured emphatically with the amulet catching the light. But I could also see how she kept touching her face, how she seemed to be checking her reflection in every available surface. Over the next few weeks, Maya's decline became more pronounced. The amulet continued to grant her incredible luck. She was accepted to every university she applied to, offered prestigious internships that normally went to graduates, even invited to exclusive events typically reserved for much older, more established people. But each success seemed to cost her more. Her beauty, which had always been her pride and primary weapon, began to fade in ways that went beyond normal aging. Her hair lost its lustrous shine, becoming thin and brittle. Her skin developed a sallow, unhealthy tone that no amount of expensive skincare could correct. Most dramatically, she began to lose weight rapidly, despite eating constantly. "I don't understand what's wrong with me," she confided to our mother one evening, her voice shaking with frustration. "I'm eating more than ever, but I keep losing weight, and I'm so tired all the time, even though I'm getting plenty of sleep." "Maybe you should see a doctor," our mother suggested, her voice full of maternal concern. "I did," Maya snapped. 3 different doctors. They all say there's nothing wrong with me. Blood work is normal, all my vitals are fine. They think it's stress, but what do I have to be stressed about? Everything in my life is perfect." But it wasn't perfect, and we both knew it. Maya's friends had started making concerned comments about her appearance. Her boyfriend had become distant, clearly uncomfortable with the dramatic changes in how she looked. Even our parents, while still proud of her achievements, had begun asking worried questions about her health. The breaking point came about 6 weeks after the exam. Maya had been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, an achievement that should have been the culmination of all her dreams. But when she came home with the acceptance letter, she looked like a ghost of her former self. She was stick-thin now, her clothes hanging loose on her diminished frame. Her hair, once her crowning glory, had become so brittle that it was falling out in clumps. Most dramatically, her face had aged what looked like decades in just a few weeks. The smooth, youthful skin was now lined and sagging, making her look more like 40 than 20. "Look," she said, waving the Harvard letter with a trembling hand. "Look what I did. Full scholarship, early admission to their most competitive program. I'm going to be rich, successful, powerful, everything I ever wanted." But there were tears streaming down her face as she spoke, and her voice was hollow with despair. Maya, I said gently, when's the last time you looked in a mirror? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. What's that supposed to mean? I think you know what it means. I gestured toward the hallway mirror. When's the last time you really looked at yourself? Maya turned toward the mirror, then immediately looked away, her face crumpling. I don't, I can't, this isn't supposed to be happening. I'm supposed to be beautiful. I'm supposed to be perfect. The amulet, I said quietly. It's not just giving you luck, is it? It's taking something in return. Maya's hand flew to the ruby stone at her throat, clutching it protectively. You don't know what you're talking about. This is just stress or some weird illness. It has nothing to do with Grandma's old jewelry. Doesn't it? I moved closer, my voice gentle but implacable. Think about it, Maya. When did this all start? When did you first notice the changes? It's not, she began, then stopped, her face going white. It can't be. Magic isn't real. This is just coincidence. Is it? Then take it off. Maya's hands clutched the amulet more tightly, and I could see the panic in her eyes. I can't. I don't want to. It's mine now. Grandma left it to me. Grandma left it to me, I corrected gently. You asked to borrow it, remember? For good luck? But I need it, Maya whispered, and now the truth was finally coming out. I can't succeed without it. I've tried, but I'm not actually smart enough or talented enough or special enough. Without the amulet, I'm nothing. It was heartbreaking to see her like this, despite everything she'd done to me. The sister I'd grown up with, the beautiful, confident girl who'd always seemed to have the world at her feet, was finally facing the reality of who she really was underneath all the supernatural luck. You could be, I said softly. You could be enough if you stopped trying to cheat your way to success. But as long as you're wearing that amulet, it's going to keep taking from you until there's nothing left. Maya shook her head frantically. You're lying. You're just jealous because I'm successful and you're not. You want me to give up the one thing that makes me special. Look at yourself, Maya. My voice was firmer now. Really look. Is this what success looks like to you? She turned toward the mirror again, and this time she didn't look away. The reflection that stared back at her was shocking. A gaunt, prematurely aged woman who looked nothing like the vibrant teenager she'd been just weeks ago. Oh, God, she whispered, her hands coming up to touch her hollow cheeks. Oh, God, what's happening to me? The amulet is feeding on your life force, I explained. Every wish it grants, every stroke of luck it provides, it takes a piece of you in return. And the more you use it, the hungrier it gets. But I can't stop, Maya said, her voice breaking. If I take it off, I'll lose everything. All my acceptances, all my opportunities, everything I've worked for will disappear. No, they won't, I said. The things you've already earned will stay earned. But you'll have to rely on your own abilities for anything new. Maya looked at me with desperate eyes. But what if my own abilities aren't enough? What if I really am as mediocre as I've always feared? It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years, and it broke my heart a little. Underneath all her cruelty and manipulation, Maya had always been driven by a deep fear of inadequacy, a terror that she wasn't naturally gifted enough to succeed on her own merits. Then you'll find out, I said simply, and maybe you'll discover that being genuinely mediocre is better than being supernaturally successful but dying in the process. Maya stared at her reflection for a long moment, then slowly reached up to unclasp the amulet. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely manage the delicate chain. I can't, she whispered. I'm too scared. I know, I said. But you have to choose, Maya. You can keep the amulet and let it drain you until you're dead. Or you can take it off and learn to live as yourself. For a moment, I thought she might actually do it. Her fingers worked at the clasp, and I could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. But then she stopped, her hands falling away from the chain. No, she said, her voice stronger now. No, I won't give up. There has to be another way. Maybe if I use it less, if I'm more careful about what I wish for. I sighed, recognizing the desperate rationalization of an addict. That's not how it works, Maya. The amulet doesn't care about your good intentions. It will keep taking until there's nothing left to take. You don't know that, she snapped, some of her old fire returning. You're not an expert on magic. Maybe there's a way to control it, to use it safely. Maybe, I agreed, but are you willing to bet your life on maybe? Maya's jaw set in that stubborn line I knew so well. Yes, I am. Because the alternative is being nobody special and I'd rather die than be ordinary. It was exactly what I'd expected her to say, but it still hurt to hear. Maya had always defined herself by her superiority to others, particularly to me. The idea of being just another person, of having to work for her achievements like everyone else, was literally worse than death to her. Then that's your choice, I said sadly. But I want you to know that it doesn't have to be this way. You could take off the amulet right now, and I would help you. We could work together to build a real life, based on your actual talents and efforts. Maya looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. Oh, sweetie, you really don't understand, do you? I can't be like you. I can't be satisfied with mediocrity and small dreams. I was meant for greatness, and I'll do whatever it takes to achieve it. She turned and walked away, the amulet pulsing like a malevolent heartbeat against her throat. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. I'd offered her a way out, but she'd chosen her path. Now I could focus on my own future without guilt. Over the following months, Maya's decline continued at an accelerated pace. She started her freshman year at Harvard looking like a walking skeleton, her once beautiful face gaunt and lined beyond her years. But academically, she was thriving beyond all reasonable expectations. Perfect grades, glowing recommendations from professors, research opportunities that typically went to graduate students. The amulet was still delivering on its promises. Her personal life, however, was in ruins. Friends drifted away, disturbed by her dramatic physical changes and increasingly erratic behavior. Her boyfriend broke up with her, unable to handle dating someone who looked decades older than her actual age. Even our parents, while still proud of her academic achievements, were clearly disturbed by her appearance and had started suggesting more aggressive medical interventions. Maya responded to each loss by using the amulet more, not less. She'd whisper to it at night, asking for social success, for restored beauty, for the love and admiration she'd once taken for granted. And the amulet would grant her requests in its twisted way. She'd have brief moments where people were drawn to her again, where her reflection looked younger, where everything seemed to go her way. But the cost of each wish grew steeper, and the benefits lasted for shorter and shorter periods. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Without Maya's constant sabotage, I discovered that I was actually quite talented in multiple areas. My test scores, while not supernaturally perfect like Maya's, were high enough to earn me admission to several excellent universities with substantial scholarship offers. I chose a school known for its strong engineering program, excited to pursue a field that had always interested me but that Maya had convinced me I was too artistic to understand. I also found that I was much more social than I'd ever realized. Without Maya constantly undermining my confidence and monopolizing attention at family gatherings, I began to make real friends, people who appreciated my humor and intelligence for their own sake, rather than as poor substitutes for Maya's supposed brilliance. The final confrontation came during winter break of my freshman year. I was home from college, tanned and healthy from a semester of outdoor activities and good food, while Maya had returned from Harvard looking like a living corpse. She was so thin now that her clothes hung off her like drapes, and her hair had become so brittle and sparse that she'd taken to wearing wigs. But the worst change was in her eyes. The bright intelligence that had once been her defining characteristic had been replaced by a desperate, hollow hunger. She looked at everything and everyone as potential sources of what she'd lost, constantly scheming for ways to regain her former beauty and social standing. "You did this to me," she said one evening, cornering me in the kitchen when our parents had gone to bed. "You knew what the amulet would do, and you let me take it anyway." "I warned you about the blood sacrifice," I reminded her. "I told you exactly what Grandma had said about giving of yourself." "You knew it meant more than that," Maya accused, her voice shaking with rage. "You knew it would do this to me, and you wanted it to happen. You were jealous of me, so you tricked me into destroying myself." I looked at my sister, or what was left of her, and felt a deep sadness. "I knew what it could do," I admitted. But I also knew that you wouldn't listen if I tried to stop you directly. You never listened to me about anything. So you decided to let me ruin my life instead of trying to save me, Maya said bitterly. No, I said firmly. I decided to let you make your own choices. Every step of the way, you chose the amulet over your health, over your relationships, over your actual well-being. I didn't make those choices for you. Maya's face contorted with fury. I was 19 years old. I was a teenager. You should have protected me. From what? From getting everything you said you wanted? You wanted guaranteed success, supernatural luck, power over your own destiny. The amulet gave you all of that. It took everything from me. No, I said sadly. It gave you exactly what you asked for at exactly the price it told you it would cost. You just didn't want to believe the price was real. Maya stared at me for a long moment, her hollow eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost palpable. Then, without warning, she lunged forward, her skeletal hands reaching for my throat. If I'm going to die, she snarled, then you're going to die with me. But Maya's supernatural luck didn't extend to physical strength, and months of magical drain had left her weak as a child. I easily caught her wrists and held her away from me, shocked by how fragile she felt, how little substance there seemed to be left to her. Maya, stop, I said gently. This isn't going to help anything. She struggled against my grip for a moment, then collapsed into sobs, all the fight going out of her at once. I'm dying, she whispered. I can feel it happening piece by piece. Every day, I'm a little less than I was the day before. Then take off the amulet, I said, though I already knew what her answer would be. I can't. The words came out as a broken whisper. I tried, but I can't make myself do it. It's like it's part of me now. When I think about removing it, I start to panic. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't. I realized with a shock that the amulet had progressed beyond simple addiction. It had bonded with Maya so completely that her body now rejected the idea of separation. She wasn't just psychologically dependent on it anymore, she was physically bound to it. There might still be a way, I said slowly. The bond requires blood, right? What if you use someone else's blood to break it? Maya's eyes lit up with desperate hope. Would that work? I don't know, I admitted, but it's worth trying. Whose blood? Maya asked eagerly. It would have to be someone with magical ability, wouldn't it? Someone whose blood would be powerful enough to overwrite the original bond? I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized where her thoughts were heading. Maya, no. Your grandma's granddaughter, too, Maya said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I knew so well. If anyone's blood would work, it would be yours. Just a few drops, that's all I need. Absolutely not, I said firmly. I'm not bonding myself to that thing just to free you from it. But you wouldn't have to use it, Maya protested. You could just break the bond and then remove it completely. You'd be saving both of us. No, Maya, find another way. Her face twisted with rage again. You selfish bitch. I'm dying and you won't even help me. After everything our family did for you, after all the love and support you got that you never deserved, you won't even try to save my life. Our family never did anything for me, I said quietly. They did everything for you. And I spent years thinking that was my fault, that I wasn't worth their attention or affection. But I know better now. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time Mom and Dad attended one of my school events? When's the last time they celebrated one of my achievements? When's the last time they asked about my dreams or goals, instead of just assuming I'd follow along with whatever you wanted to do? Maya opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, unable to come up with a counterexample. I'm sorry you're suffering, I continued. I really am. But I won't sacrifice my own future to fix a problem you created for yourself. Maya stared at me for a long moment, then straightened up with what little dignity she had left. Fine, she said coldly. If that's how you want to be, then I hope you're happy with your mediocre little life. I hope you enjoy being ordinary and forgotten while I achieve immortal greatness. Immortal? I asked, alarmed. Maya, what are you talking about? But she was already walking away, the amulet pulsing against her throat like a second heart. I had a terrible feeling that she was planning something desperate, but I didn't know what I could do to stop her. The answer came 3 days later when Maya collapsed during a family dinner and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors were baffled by her condition. Her vital signs were weak but stable, and she appeared to be in some kind of mystical coma. They could find no medical explanation for her state. I knew better. Maya had made her final gamble with the amulet, asking for true immortality rather than simple success. But immortality required the ultimate sacrifice, and the amulet had taken her consciousness, her very soul, as payment. Her body would live forever, preserved by magic, but Maya herself was gone. She lingered in the hospital for several weeks while our parents exhausted themselves and their savings trying to find a cure for her mysterious condition. I visited her once, looking down at the skeletal form that had once been my beautiful, terrible sister. The amulet was still around her neck, pulsing with a malevolent light that only I seemed able to see. It had gotten everything it wanted, a permanent host whose life force it could drain indefinitely. Maya would never wake up, never achieve the greatness she had craved, never experience another moment of conscious triumph or joy. She had become nothing more than a magical battery, sustaining the artifact that had promised her everything and delivered only endless hunger. I reached toward the amulet, thinking I might finally be able to remove it now that Maya was unconscious. But the moment my fingers approached the ruby, it flared with such malevolent heat that I jerked my hand back, the skin on my fingertips blistered and red. The amulet had claimed its prize, and it would not give her up easily. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the shell that had been my sister. "I really am sorry it came to this." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. Maya had made her choices at every step, had chosen power over family, success over genuine happiness, supernatural advantage over authentic achievement. She had poisoned me in my previous life without a moment's hesitation, had sabotaged my efforts for years, had treated me like a disposable obstacle to her own ambitions. I was sorry that anyone had to suffer as she was suffering now, but I wasn't sorry that she could no longer hurt me or anyone else. The doctors eventually moved Maya to a long-term care facility, a sterile place that specialized in cases like hers, patients whose bodies lived on despite the absence of any discernible consciousness. Our parents visited faithfully at first, holding on to hope that she might somehow recover. But as the months stretched into years, their visits became less frequent, their grief slowly transforming into a kind of resigned acceptance. I finished my degree in engineering, graduating summa cum laude with multiple job offers from prestigious companies. Without Maya's interference, I discovered that I had a genuine talent for innovation and problem solving, abilities that had been suppressed for so long I'd forgotten they existed. I also fell in love, really, truly in love, with a classmate named David who appreciated my intelligence, my humor, and my kindness, without ever making me feel like I had to compete for his attention or prove my worth through achievements. It was the first relationship I'd ever had where I felt valued for who I was rather than judged for who I wasn't. On my wedding day, 5 years after Maya's collapse, our parents asked if I wanted to visit her before the ceremony. "She's still your sister," our mother said gently. "I know things were complicated between you two, but she would want to be part of your special day." I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw the toll that Maya's condition had taken. She'd aged dramatically in the past few years, stress and grief etching new lines around her eyes and mouth. Our father looked similarly worn, as if the weight of his guilt over favoring Maya had finally caught up with him. "No," I said softly. "Maya made her choices, and this is mine. Today is about my future, not our past." The wedding was beautiful, a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported David and me. As I exchanged vows with my husband, promising to build a life based on honesty, mutual respect, and shared dreams, I felt a sense of peace I'd never experienced before. Later, during the reception, my father approached me with tears in his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Your mother and we made a lot of mistakes when you girls were growing up. We were so dazzled by Maya's achievements that we overlooked your needs, your feelings, your accomplishments. We failed you as parents, and I'm sorry." It was the first time either of my parents had ever acknowledged the favoritism that had shaped my entire childhood. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication that my perceptions had been accurate, sadness that it had taken Maya's destruction for them to see the truth. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means more than you know. You turned out to be everything we should have seen all along," he continued. "You're kind, intelligent, hardworking, genuine. You built a real life for yourself with real relationships and real achievements. Maya had everything handed to her, and she still wasn't satisfied. She always wanted more, always needed to be the best, the most successful, the most admired. It was never enough." "No," I agreed, "it wasn't." "Do you think she's happy?" he asked suddenly. "Wherever she is now, do you think she finally found what she was looking for?" I thought about Maya lying motionless in her hospital bed while the amulet slowly drained away whatever remained of her essence. I thought about the desperate hunger I'd seen in her eyes during those final weeks, the way she'd clutched the artifact like a lifeline even as it pulled her under. "I think she got exactly what she asked for," I said carefully. "Whether that's the same thing as happiness, I don't know." My father nodded sadly and returned to the reception, leaving me alone with my thoughts for a moment. Through the window, I could see David laughing with his groomsmen, his face bright with joy and love. In a few hours, we'd leave for our honeymoon, then return to start our married life together. We had plans, modest, achievable plans, based on our actual abilities and shared values. We wanted to buy a house, start a family, build careers we could be proud of. Simple dreams, but they were ours. Maya had wanted to be extraordinary, to stand above and apart from ordinary human concerns. She'd achieved that goal in the most literal sense possible. She was now something beyond human, sustained by magic and completely divorced from the normal experiences of life, love, growth, and connection. But looking out at my husband, my friends, my small but genuine collection of people who cared about me for who I really was, I knew I'd chosen the better path. I'd chosen to be real rather than remarkable, authentic rather than superior. And that choice had given me everything Maya's supernatural ambitions never could. Genuine happiness, earned through honest effort and shared with people who loved me, without conditions or magical compulsion. 10 years later, David and I had built the life we'd dreamed of. We owned a comfortable house in a good neighborhood, had two beautiful children who were growing up confident and loved, and had established ourselves in careers that challenged us and provided meaningful contributions to our community. I'd been promoted to senior engineer at my company and had several patents to my name. David had opened his own architectural firm and was gaining recognition for his innovative, sustainable designs. Our children knew they had an aunt, but they'd never met her. Maya remained in the care facility, her condition unchanged, her body sustained by whatever dark bargain she'd made with the amulet. Our parents still visited occasionally, though they'd largely moved on with their lives, finally learning to take pride in my achievements rather than mourning Maya's lost potential. I visited her once more on the 10th anniversary of her collapse. She looked exactly the same as she had on that first day, skeletal, pale, ancient despite her actual age. The amulet still pulsed at her throat, its ruby surface seeming to contain an endless, hungry darkness. "Hello, Maya," I said softly, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "I thought you'd like to know how things turned out." I told her about my life, my marriage, my children, my career. I described the satisfaction of solving complex engineering problems, the joy of watching my children take their first steps and speak their first words, the deep contentment of building something real and lasting with someone who truly knew and loved me. "I know you probably can't hear me," I said finally, "but if some part of you is still in there, I want you to know that I forgive you. For the poison, for the sabotage, for all the years of making me feel worthless and small. I understand now that you were acting out of your own fear and insecurity, and I'm sorry that you never learned to be satisfied with enough." The amulet pulsed, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind Maya's closed eyelids. But it might have been my imagination. "I also want you to know that I'm grateful," I continued. "Your actions in my previous life taught me what really matters. When I was given a second chance, I used it to build something genuine instead of chasing empty superiority. In a strange way, you helped me become the person I was meant to be. I stood to leave, then paused at the doorway for one last look at my sister. She lay motionless in her mechanical bed, connected to machines that monitored vital signs that meant nothing, sustained by magic that had cost her everything she'd claimed to value. "Goodbye, Maya," I said. "I hope someday you find peace." As I walked back to my car, I pulled out my phone to check messages from David and the kids. My daughter had lost her first tooth and wanted to show me when I got home. My son had scored his first goal in soccer and was excited to tell me about it. David had sent a picture of the dinner he was preparing for my return. Nothing fancy, just a simple meal made with love. These were the moments that made up a real life, I realized. Not supernatural achievements or magical advantages, but the small, genuine connections between people who chose to care about each other. Maya had never understood that distinction. She'd seen love and admiration as things to be won through superiority, rather than earned through authenticity. But I understood it now, and that understanding had given me everything the amulet never could. A life worth living, built on truth instead of illusion, sustained by real relationships instead of magical compulsion. As I drove home to my family, I thought about the girl I'd been in my previous life, insecure, always comparing myself to Maya, convinced that I was fundamentally inadequate. That girl had died along with the body that had housed her, and I was grateful for that death. It had cleared the way for me to become someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth, independent of anyone else's achievements or opinions. The amulet had promised Maya everything she thought she wanted. But in the end, the greatest magic had been learning to want the right things: love over admiration, authenticity over superiority, enough over everything. Those were the real treasures, and they couldn't be stolen, couldn't be bargained away, couldn't be lost to time or circumstance. They could only be earned, one genuine moment at a time. I pulled into my driveway as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Through the window, I could see my family gathered around the dinner table, waiting for me to join them. David looked up and waved, his face lighting up with the kind of smile that no magic could fabricate. The smile of someone who was genuinely happy to see me, not because of what I could do for him or what I represented, but simply because I was me. I waved back and hurried toward the house, toward the warm light and laughter and love that waited inside. Behind me, somewhere across the city, Maya lay in her sterile room, trapped forever in the prison she'd built from her own ambitions. But that was her story now, and this was mine. And finally, for the first time in any of my lives, my story was exactly what I wanted it to be.